The morning of my 35th birthday didn't arrive with fanfare or the warmth of a celebration. Instead, it crept into our high-end colonial home in Silver Ridge, Maryland, like a cold draft under a door. I sat at the expansive granite kitchen island, my fingers tracing the condensation on a mug of black coffee. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic, expensive-sounding tick of the wall clock and the muffled hum of the central heating. This was a house built on success, but lately, none of that success felt like mine. I watched Elena move through the kitchen. She was a whirlwind of silk and focused energy, her eyes locked onto her smartphone as she dictated an email to her senior clerk. At 34, Elena was a rising star at one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in the state. She looked every bit the part. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her suit was tailored to the millimeter, and her expression was one of perpetual, high-stakes calculation. I, on the other hand, felt like a ghost in my own kitchen. For a decade, I had been the steady one. I was the architect who took the safe, local government contracts so she could have the freedom to chase the big fish cases. I had been her rock during the bar exam, her chef during her 80-hour work weeks, and her biggest cheerleader when she made junior partner. But over the last year, something had shifted. My stability was no longer seen as a virtue. It was being treated like a lead weight. "Elena?" I said, my voice sounding thin, even to my own ears. She didn't look up. She was typing now, her thumbs flying across the screen. "Did you move my leather briefcase?" "Oh, Julian, I told you specifically I needed it by the door. I have the Henderson deposition this morning, and if I'm a minute late, it's on you." "It's exactly where you left it, Elena," I replied, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Right by the mudroom bench. Also, I don't know if you realize what day it is. It's my birthday." She paused. It was only for a second, a brief glitch in her corporate programming. She finally looked at me, but there was no happy birthday in her eyes. There was only a flick of annoyance, the kind you give to a stray dog that won't stop barking. She reached into her designer purse, rummaging through lipsticks and legal pads, and pulled out a small, crumpled slip of paper. She slid it across the cold granite toward me. It was a $10 coupon for the Rusty Fork, a greasy spoon diner on the edge of the industrial district. "Get yourself some pancakes, Julian," she said, her tone dripping with a cold, casual cruelty. "It's about all we can afford to waste on your hobbies right now, isn't it? Since you haven't brought in a private commission in 18 months, I figured I'd start budgeting for your lifestyle. Maybe eating with the common folk will remind you what it's like to actually earn a win." She checked her gold watch and grabbed her coat. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. And for heaven's sake, try to do something productive today besides brooding." The garage door slammed, the vibration rattling my coffee mug. I was alone. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome to Family Secrets and Revenge. I stared at that coupon for an hour. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a white flag. Not of my surrender, but of hers. She had surrendered the last shred of respect she had for the man I was. We had started with nothing, living in a cramped studio in downtown Baltimore, eating ramen and dreaming of the skyline we would one day build together. But as her paycheck grew, her memory of our shared struggle had been erased, replaced by a narrative where she was the hero and I was the lucky passenger. To Elena, I wasn't the man who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her memorize case law. I was just the failed architect who worked for the city planning office. Well, she didn't see the beauty in the public libraries I designed or the community centers that gave kids a place to go after school. If it wasn't a glass skyscraper with a billionaire's name on it, it didn't count. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a builder, steady and capable. I decided in that moment that I wouldn't spend my 35th year mourning the ghost of a marriage. I picked up the coupon. I put on my worn canvas jacket. I didn't know it yet, but that $10 scrap of paper was about to become the blueprint for a life she could never have imagined. I drove my 10-year-old sedan out of our manicured neighborhood, past the manicured lawns and the silent houses, toward the part of Silver Ridge that the city council liked to pretend didn't exist. The Rusty Fork was exactly what it sounded like, a place where the coffee was strong enough to peel paint and the atmosphere was thick with the smell of diesel and old regrets. I sat in a corner booth, the red vinyl cracked and taped together. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few truckers and a tired-looking waitress who looked like she'd been on her feet since the Nixon administration. I wasn't even hungry. I just wanted to be somewhere that didn't feel like a museum of my own failures. As I waited for a cup of coffee I didn't really want, an elderly man shuffled through the door. He wore a navy blazer that had seen better decades. The elbows were thin, and a few buttons were missing, but he carried himself with a strange, lingering authority. In his arms, he clutched a massive, leather-bound portfolio that looked incredibly heavy for a man of his age. He tried to slide into the booth across from me, but his hands were shaking. In a sudden, clumsy moment, the brass latch on his portfolio snapped. The contents didn't just slide out, they exploded. Dozens of oversized architectural blueprints, vellum sketches, and site maps spilled across the grease-stained floor. The waitress walked right past him, rolling her eyes as she headed toward the kitchen. "Clean that up, Pops. People gotta walk there," she muttered. The old man looked devastated. He sank onto his knees, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as he tried to gather the papers with trembling fingers. I couldn't just sit there. I slid out of my booth and knelt beside him. "Let me help you with those," I said softly. It's fine," he stammered, his face flushing red. I'm a bit slower than I used to be." As I began to stack the sheets, my eyes caught a glimpse of the work. I stopped moving. My breath hitched in my throat. I wasn't looking at the work of a hobbyist. These were masterworks. They were drafts for an urban revitalization project, intricate, soulful, and revolutionary. He hadn't just drawn buildings. He had designed an ecosystem where light, air, and human connection were the primary materials. "These are incredible," I whispered, my thumb tracing a hand-drawn cross-section of a cantilevered garden. "The structural integrity of this North Key design is brilliant. You're using the natural tide to cool the lower levels?" The man stopped fumbling and looked at me. His eyes were no longer those of a confused senior. They were sharp, piercing blue, and full of a sudden, intense intelligence. "You're an architect," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can smell the graphite and the frustration on you from across the room." I helped him back into his seat and gathered the rest of his work. He introduced himself simply as Silas. It took me a moment, but as I looked at the signature in the corner of the blueprints, S. Thorne, the realization hit me like a physical blow. Silas Thorne. 20 years ago, he was the king of American architecture. He had designed the Thorne Tower in Chicago and the National Gallery expansion. Then, following the death of his daughter in a tragic accident, he had vanished. The rumors said he'd gone mad, or gone broke, or moved to a monastery in the Alps. Instead, he was sitting in a diner in Silver Ridge, Maryland, eating a $4 breakfast. "The city council thinks I'm a ghost," Silas said, leaning in. His voice was a low rasp. "They want to turn the old waterfront district into a series of glass boxes, luxury condos for people who have more money than taste. They want to kill the soul of this town for a quick tax break. I've spent 5 years trying to stop them, but I don't have the vision anymore, Julian. My eyes are tired and my heart is angry." He looked at the $10 coupon sitting on my table, then back at my face. "I saw you looking at those drawings. You didn't just see lines, you saw the life inside them. I own that land on the waterfront. All of it. I've held on to it for 30 years, refusing to sell to the vultures. I'm looking for someone who still feels a sting of being underestimated. Someone who wants to build something that matters, and not just something that sells." He pushed a blank vellum sheet and a drafting pencil toward me across the table. "Redesign the North Key for me, Julian. Right here, on this sticky table. If you can make me feel something other than bitterness, I'll give you the contract of a lifetime. I'll fund the whole damn thing. But there's a catch. You can't tell a soul. Not the city, not the press, and especially not that wife of yours who thinks you're only worth $10. I thought about Elena's smirk. I thought about the way she looked at me like I was a broken appliance. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were in Julian's shoes, standing at the crossroads of your career while your spouse looked down on you, Wait, would you take a leap of faith with a stranger like Silas? For the next 6 months, I lived a double life that would have made a spy envious. By day, I was the mediocre Julian. I went to the planning office, filed permits, and endured the increasingly sharp barbs from Elena. She had started spending more and more time with a man named Marcus Sterling. Marcus was everything I wasn't, a flashy hedge fund manager with a penchant for white Ferraris and loud watches. He was new money in the worst way, and Elena was mesmerized by it. She started coming home later, smelling of expensive gin and Marcus's cologne, barely acknowledging my existence. Marcus thinks your little obsession with public spaces is quaint, she told me one night, tossing her coat onto a chair I'd built by hand. He says that in the real world, if a building doesn't generate $5,000 a square foot in rent, it's a failure. Just like your career, Julian. Quaint. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I just nodded and waited for her to go to sleep. Once the house was silent, I would drive to Silas's estate. It was a crumbling mansion on the edge of the cliffs, overlooking the very waterfront we intended to save. We worked in a massive library filled with thousands of books and the smell of old paper. We worked by the glow of high-end monitors and the flicker of a fireplace. I wasn't just designing a plaza. I was pouring every ounce of my repressed rage, my forgotten dreams, and my secret hopes into the Thorne Heiress project. I was creating a masterpiece of sustainable, beautiful architecture that would put every glass box in the country to shame. Silas was a brutal mentor, pushing me to find the truth in every curve and column. Build it like you're saying goodbye to the man you used to be, Silas told me one night as the sun began to peek over the Atlantic. I was doing exactly that. The tension in my marriage finally reached a breaking point on our 11th anniversary. I had tried one last time to see if there was any humanity left in the woman I had married. I bought a small bouquet of her favorite lilies and booked a table at the quiet Italian place where we'd had our first date. I waited for 2 hours. She never showed up. When I finally returned home, the lights were all on. Elena was standing in the living room, surrounded by open suitcases. Marcus was leaning against the doorway, a smug, proprietary grin on his face. Julian, thank God you're back, Elena said. When her voice wasn't sad, it was relieved, like she was finally finishing a chore. We need to talk. Marcus has been headhunted for a massive firm in New York, and he's asked me to come along as lead counsel. It's the opportunity I've been waiting for my entire life. I looked at the lilies in my hand, then at the man standing in my house. And where does that leave us, Elena? It doesn't, she said, her eyes as cold as the Maryland winter. I'm moving to Manhattan on Monday. I've already had my lawyers draw up the divorce papers. They're on the island. She walked over to me, looking at my dusty shoes and my tired eyes. You're a good man in your own way, Julian, but you're a $10 coupon man. You're content with the quaint and the local. I'm a champagne woman. I need a life that matches my ambition, and you're the anchor that's keeping me from floating. I think it's best if we just cut the rope. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't the crushing weight I expected. It was lightness. The anchor hadn't been me, it had been her. I'll sign, I said quietly. You will? She seemed surprised, perhaps even a little disappointed that I wasn't going to beg. On one condition, I added. Give me 3 months. Let's not file the papers with the court until the end of the quarter. I have a project at work I need to finish, and I don't want the legal distraction until the final permits are signed. She laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Still worried about your little library permits? Fine, Julian. 3 months. Stay in the house until then. Marcus and I will be staying at his penthouse in the city anyway. Just make sure the place is clean when I come back to sell it. She didn't know that in 3 months, the Thorne Heiress project would be unveiled. She didn't know that I wasn't just the architect. I was the majority stakeholder in the new development firm Silas had created for me. The next 90 days were a blur of adrenaline and secrecy. While Elena was in New York, playing the part of the high-powered power couple with Marcus, I was on the ground in Silver Ridge. Silas and I had secured the funding through a private trust. We didn't need the city council's permission for the first phase because Silas already owned the land, a loophole the vultures had overlooked for years. We began the Renaissance project under the guise of site remediation. Huge fences went up around the waterfront. Security was tight. The town was buzzing with rumors. Who was the mystery developer? What were they building? Marcus's firm was also bidding on a small sliver of the adjacent land, hoping to build a parking garage and a luxury mall. He had no idea that I held the rights to the only access roads into the district. I was sitting on a royal flush, and he was betting the house on a pair of twos. I worked 18-hour days. I slept in my office. I ate at the Rusty Fork every morning, not because I had a coupon, but because it reminded me where I came from. Every time I felt tired, I thought of the way Elena looked at me the night she left. It was better than any energy drink. The night of the Silver Ridge Future Gala arrived. This was the most exclusive event in the state's history. Every politician, every CEO, and every socialite was there to hear the official announcement of the waterfront's future. Elena and Marcus flew in from New York. They wanted to be there to see Marcus's firm win the Development of the Year award, which Marcus had essentially bought with campaign contributions. I arrived late. I was no longer the man in the dusty canvas jacket. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit. My hair was trimmed, and there was a calm, dangerous confidence in my stride. Silas had insisted I look the part of a titan. When I walked into the ballroom of the Grand Regency, the air seemed to shift. I saw Elena across the room. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first 3 years of salary. She saw me, and her jaw actually dropped. She whispered something to Marcus, who looked me up and down with a sneer. "Julian?" Elena said, approaching me with a glass of champagne in her hand. "What on earth are you doing here? Did you sneak in through the kitchen? This isn't a public park meeting." "I'm here by invitation, Elena," I said, my voice smooth and level. "From who?" "The Janitors Union," Marcus chimed in, stepping closer to put a hand on Elena's waist. "Look, buddy, I know it's hard seeing your wife move up in the world, but showing up here in a rented suit won't change the fact that you're a nobody." "We'll see about that, Marcus," I said, catching the eye of Silas Thorne, who was watching from the shadows of the VIP balcony. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story. The betrayal of the divorce papers or the coldness of that $10 birthday gift? Share your thoughts in the comments." The mayor of Silver Ridge took the stage. The room went quiet as the lights dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor began, "tonight we reveal the project that will redefine our city. For months we have debated the future of our waterfront. We have seen many bids, including a spirited one from Mr. Sterling's group." Marcus straightened his tie, looking ready to walk toward the stage. "However," the mayor continued, "one proposal was so visionary, so well-funded, and so deeply connected to the history of this town that there was no contest. This project is the Thorne Plaza, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the man who will be leading this multi-billion-dollar endeavor. The CEO of Thorne Development and the lead architect of our new skyline, Mr. Julian. The spotlight swung through the room, cutting through the darkness like a blade. It landed directly on me. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. I walked toward the stage, my footsteps echoing in the hushed ballroom. I passed Elena and Marcus. I didn't even look at them. I had a city to build. I stood behind the podium, looking out at the sea of shocked faces. I saw the city council members who had ignored my emails for years. I saw the developers who had tried to buy out Silas. And I saw Elena. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was pale, her glass of champagne trembling in her hand. "A few months ago," I began, my voice amplified by the speakers, "someone told me that I was a $10 coupon man. They told me that my vision for this city was quaint. They thought that because I valued people over profits, I was a failure." I looked directly at the table where Elena was sitting. But architecture isn't about how much rent you can squeeze out of a square foot. It's about building a foundation that can withstand the storm. It's about seeing the potential in a piece of land that everyone else has written off. Tonight, we aren't just building a plaza. We are reclaiming the soul of Silver Ridge. And we're doing it with the support of a man who knows that true value isn't found in a bank account, but in the integrity of the design. The room erupted. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a standing ovation. People realized that the Thorne Heiress project was going to bring thousands of jobs and billions in revenue to the area. I was no longer a nobody. I was the most powerful man in the room. After the formal presentation, I was swamped by investors and reporters. It took an hour before I could break away to get a breath of fresh air on the terrace. Elena was waiting for me. She was alone. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, the news that I owned the access roads to his planned development had reached him, and he was currently on the phone with his lawyers, trying to figure out how to save his firm from bankruptcy. "Julian," she whispered. Her voice was different now. The edge was gone, replaced by a desperate, fawning sweetness that made my skin crawl. I, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? We're a team. We could have done this together." "We were never a team, Elena," I said, leaning against the stone railing. "You were the lead, and I was the extra. That's how you wanted it. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a trophy that looked like success. When I didn't shine enough for you, you threw me away." "I was just trying to push you," she cried, a stray tear running down her cheek. "I knew you had greatness in you. I just wanted you to reach it. We can fix this. The divorce papers? I haven't filed my copy yet. We can tear them up. We can move to New York together as the most powerful couple in the city. The papers I signed are already with my attorney, Elena. And I'm not moving to New York. I'm staying right here to build my city. And as for the house, I've decided not to sell it. I'm turning it into a foundation for young architects who don't have the right connections." She looked like I had slapped her. "But where am I supposed to go?" "Marcus. He's in trouble, Julian. His firm is being investigated for fraud. I could lose everything." "You still have that coupon I gave back to you, don't you?" I asked. "The Rusty Fork has great pancakes. I suggest you start there." The fallout was swifter than anyone expected. Marcus Sterling's firm collapsed within 6 months. It turned out his hedge fund was largely built on a house of cards, and my refusal to grant him access to the waterfront project was the final breeze that blew it all down. He fled the country to avoid a subpoena, leaving Elena to face the music alone. Because Elena had insisted on a very specific pre-nuptial agreement years ago, one designed to protect her high salary from my mediocrity, she found herself completely locked out of my new wealth. She had no legal claim to Thorne Heiress development. She had gambled everything on Marcus and lost. She spent the next year working at a small firm in a different county, her reputation in Silver Ridge tarnished by her association with Marcus and her very public dismissal of the city's new hero. Watching someone who discarded you suddenly try to reclaim you once you found success is a unique kind of pain. If you were Julian, would you give her a second chance? Or is the bridge already burned to ashes? Let me know in the comments. Silas Thorne didn't live to see the grand opening of the plaza, but he saw the first buildings rise. He passed away peacefully in his library, leaving his entire estate to the Thorne Heiress Foundation. He died knowing his legacy was in good hands. I didn't become the glass box architect Elena wanted me to be. I became the architect that people needed. No, I built parks that stayed open late, libraries that were works of art, and housing that people could actually afford. And I found someone else, a woman named Clara, who was a structural engineer on the project. She didn't care about the gala or the suit. She fell in love with the man who spent his Saturdays walking the construction site in muddy boots, talking to the welders and the masons. I occasionally see Elena's name in the legal journals. She's doing okay, I suppose. She's a competent lawyer, but she'll never be the champagne woman she dreamed of being. She's just another person in the crowd. I still keep that $10 coupon, though. I have it framed in my private study. Not out of spite, but out of gratitude. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the realization that they don't deserve to be part of your future. It's a tough lesson to learn, but sometimes the person you're looking down on is the only one who could have lifted you up. What do you think? Did Elena get what she deserved, or was Julian too cold in his revenge? The Thorne Heiress Plaza became a national landmark. It wasn't just a win for me, it was a win for everyone who had been told they weren't enough. Every year on my birthday, I go back to the Rusty Fork. I sit in the same cracked vinyl booth, and I order the same stack of pancakes. I look at the blueprints for the next phase of the city, And I think about Silas. I think about how a broken man and a failed architect changed the world with nothing but a portfolio and a $10 coupon. His success isn't about the car you drive or the suit you wear. It's about the buildings you leave behind and the lives you touch. Elena wanted a life of luxury. I wanted a life of legacy. In the end, we both got exactly what we built. The city of Silver Ridge is different now. It's a place of light and hope. And every time I look at the skyline, I don't see my name in neon. I see the dreams of 1,000 people who finally have a place to call home. Life has a funny way of leveling the playing field. People will mock your failed life, they will judge your hobbies, and they will hand you coupons when you deserve commitment. But remember, their assessment of you is not your reality. It is merely a reflection of their own limitations. Keep building, keep dreaming, and never let someone else's small-mindedness shrink your world. Can I thank you for joining me for this story on family secrets and revenge? If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever been underestimated by someone you loved, please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more cinematic stories of justice and transformation, and share this with someone